reasons I do these top 10 lists is that I get to skip the mediocre, unremarkable stuff and just talk about really great games. Like a top 10 of the best Switch games as voted for by the people who actually buy and play the games. That should be 100% killer, 0% filler, right? Right, yeah. Yeah, I'm psyched. I'm so effing pumped for this list. My name's not important. Now hit me with the booms. Number 10, Mega Man X Legacy Collection. Roman numerals are everywhere right now, yet apparently Mega Man X was not in fact the 10th game in the series. In fact, Mega Man X was a spin-off series of the original Mega Man, first released in 1993 for the Super Famicom in Japan, and 1994 on SNES for the rest of the world. For those unfamiliar with the series, the Mega Man games are side-scrolling action shooters, whereby the player guides android protagonist Mega Man through levels, defeating bosses and gaining one of their powers. The Mega Man X series took the action 100 years further into the future, with a more advanced player character, greater freedom of movement, and a steady progression system throughout the game. This collection brings together re-released versions of the first 4 entries in the Mega Man X series, along with some additional bonus fan service extras in The Museum. This digital shrine includes production art and old promotional materials for the game. Mega Man X Legacy Collection is a fan-baiting box set, and the fans have certainly made their voices heard on Metacritic. This compilation of influential 16 and 32-bit shooters has earned 8.7 with Metacritic users. Number 9, Okami HD. Okami is one of those games that used to appear on Best Games You've Never Played lists. The 2006 original was released on PS2 and later on the Nintendo Wii, and is a cel-shaded action-adventure in the Zelda mold. The art style is heavily influenced by Japanese classical art, designed to look like a traditional sumie inkwash illustration. The gameplay itself is familiar to Zelda fans with a mix of puzzle platforming and action-adventure. You play Sun Goddess Amaterasu manifesting on Earth as a white wolf, as you traverse the game's fictionalised depiction of Japan on a quest to rid the land of the influence of a number of evil spirits. Aside from its beautiful stylised appearance, Okami's most notable gameplay feature is the celestial brush mechanic. Using the Joy-Con analog stick, or the touchscreen if you're playing handheld, the player can pause the game and make strokes with the brush which have direct effects on the environment. Useful both in combat and in puzzle solving, it's not just a gimmick, it fits thematically with the game's legendary Japanese setting and hand-painted aesthetic style. Okami continues to find new audiences as it's re-released on every console imaginable, and the Switch playing corner of the fanbase have given it 8.7. Number 8, Assault Android Cactus Plus. For those of you who've been waiting for a big AAA game to make it to the Switch Top 10, I'm sorry. Assault Android Cactus Plus is a port of the 2015 PC twin-stick shooter by developer Witchbeam. If you've seen my other videos, by now you might have deduced that I'm not exactly a fan of bullet hell games, so I can't say I've given this one a try as yet. Apparently there is a plot, involving a character named Cactus answering a distress call on a space freighter under attack by its own robot workers, but this seems to be the background to the actual story. That is, the one where you blow things up without getting blown up yourself. Gameplay takes place from an overhead perspective, with the player under almost constant barrage from wave after wave of enemies, dodging in between huge numbers of slow-moving bullets in arenas which frequently morph and transform to keep you on your toes. Just in case all of this chaos isn't enough for your soft human brain, up to 3 other players can join in the game in co-op mode. Metacritic users rate Assault Android Cactus Plus 8.7 out of 10. Those same fans gave Breath of the Wild 8.5. Just saying. Entries 7 through 2 in this list are all scored 8.8. Metacritic presumably rounds up to the nearest 10th percentile, meaning these next 6 games are pretty much too close to call. Number 7, Stardew Valley. Is your TV too big to play Stardew Valley on, but your phone's too small? Well, first worlder, now there's a compromise. Multi-platform indie title Stardew Valley was ported to the Switch in 2017. It's a hybrid farming sim and RPG, heavily influenced by the Harvest Moon series, and with a plot that feels like it was taken from a romantic comedy. Your character, escaping the hustle and bustle of city life, moves to the country to take over their grandfather's rundown farm, make friends with the locals, fall in love, and realise that he was far happier than he would have been living as a rich plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills. My apologies, that's the outline for the plot of Doc Hollywood, starring Michael J. Fox. Primarily the work of solo developer Eric Concerned Ape Barone, or possibly Baroni, Stardew Valley's top-down pixel art style is a throwback to the 16-bit era. The player gets to name and design their character, choose from a handful of map layouts, and is then put to work, developing their farm into a working, thriving business. Keeping things wholesome and family-friendly, the game only allows for arable farming and the harvesting of animal byproducts like milk, cheese and eggs, so parents don't have to worry about the twee little video games subjecting their kids to the horrors of battery farming. Except for fishing, because fuck fish apparently. If the idea of a business management sim in cuddly pixel art packaging can't hold your interest for more than a couple of hours, Stardew Valley also offers diversions in the form of social simulation, where the character gets to interact with the townsfolk and potentially become romantically involved. Also, there are procedurally generated caves to explore and creatures to murder. Fans and critic alike give high praise to Stardew Valley, with fan reviews aggregating a score of 8.8. Number 6. Hollow Knight. Metroidvania is a term used to describe games derived from the formulae set out by genre-defining 80s and 90s console games Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and is usually used by reviewers as a sort of shorthand for side-scrolling, non-linear platformers. Something about this genre has made it exceedingly popular with indie developers in the last few years, and this has resulted in a sort of golden age of Metroidvania games that has given us Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is an atmospheric, responsive, challenging game with stylish, attractively drawn 2D parallax graphics that are a blend of darkly gothic and cutesy that would totally have appealed to my 16-year-old self. Gameplay is akin to a 2D Dark Souls, where combat requires skill and timing, and death results in the loss of currency, the recovery of which is possible if you can find and defeat your own corpse. Also in the spirit of Dark Souls, the game is liberally sprinkled with bosses, each one of which requires the player to develop a unique strategy to deal with. Boss fights are particularly unforgiving, and mistakes are punished. Despite reviews hardly being able to avoid drawing comparison to other games like Castlevania or Dark Souls, fans still seem to rally around this indie darling. The Switch version in particular has scored very well, with a Metacritic user score currently standing at 8.8. Enjoying the video? If so, gently caress the like button for me, would you? It does wonders for my ego. Number 5. Sonic Mania Plus. Don't tell Mario, but his former Sega nemesis Sonic is having something of a resurgence in popular opinion right now, and not just because he gets to pop up in Smash Brothers from time to time. It seems what's really dragged our favourite blue hedgehog from joining other 90s mascots in obscurity was the tender loving care afforded by the fan community. Former modders and fan game makers Christian Whitehead, Headcanon and Pagoda West originally developed the game very much in the style of the Mega Drive and Genesis originals, using tools originally made for porting the classic games to modern hardware. Their recipe for success was to essentially make an early 90s Sonic game for modern systems, and as such the familiar gameplay elements from Sonics 2 and 3 are all here. Running, spinning, jumping, and a choice of playable characters, each with different abilities. Levels from previous games return with a new lick of paint and new features to keep things fresh and entertaining, and new levels are designed to blend seamlessly with the aesthetic of the classics. Fan response has been very positive, and for fans like myself who played the original Sonic games on the Game Gear, the Switch makes for a logical home for this trip down memory lane. Now, the original launch of Sonic Mania actually ties with Sonic Mania Plus at 8.8, meaning that the Sonic Mania games could in theory lead the pack with a score of 17.6 out of 10, though apparently that's not how math works. Number 4. Valkyria Chronicles. Despite releasing around the same time as the fourth game in the saga, this Switch port of the original Valkyria Chronicles has proven significantly more popular with fans, a game which itself would barely scrape into the top 20 list. The Switch version of the first Valkyria Chronicles launched 10 years after its first PS3 release. Valkyria Chronicles is a unique blend of turn-based strategy RPG and third-person shooter, set in a fictional alt-world Europe during its equivalent of the Second World War between the Empire and the Atlantic Federation. The story takes place in Gaulia, a hitherto neutral nation in the conflict, and is told from the perspective of members of the Gaulian militia as they attempt to repel the invading empire. To be clear, this isn't a remaster. The game doesn't look or play significantly differently to the PS3 version, and isn't the super smooth, polished version available on the PS4. In fact, this port has been criticised by some for unexpectedly slow gameplay when battlefields get busy. Despite technical issues, fans seem to have responded well to the Switch release, earning it an aggregate score of 8.8. Number 3. Gris. Alright, so this is either Gris, as in grisly murder, or Gris, as in grey in French. I shall take the controversial stance that France is better than murder and continue to say it as Gris. Gris is a work of art as much as it is a game. It's not a free roaming open world experience, but a linear story that guides you exactly where it wants you to go. It is, as you can see, visually stunning. Assigning it any sort of genre or gameplay attributes would be to call it a video game, when instead it appears to be some kind of interactive illustration. Like Celeste, which appears in the top 10 Switch games according to critics, spoiler, it's not in this list, Gris is a thinly veiled metaphor wrapped up in a video game. Unlike Celeste, Gris doesn't shrink away from this or allow you to play without heeding the message. If you don't like your stories with a moral, don't play. Gris was developed by Devolver Digital, released in 2018 on multiple platforms, and has been particularly well received on Switch. Fan reviews have scored an average of 8.8. My advice, if you're picking this up on Switch, is to play it docked for maximum visual impact. Number 2, Katana Zero. Alright, personal rant time. As someone born in the 1980s, I'd quite like it to end now, please. Seriously. Except for a brief interval in the 90s where we looked back at the previous decade and laughed, it seems like the 1980s cultural revival has lasted longer than the decade itself. Games like Devolver's Katana Zero revel in the neon cyberpunk aesthetic popularised in 80s cinema and animation, and its heavy electronic soundtrack evokes games of the era. I think it's about time the 2010s grew the hell up and got their own visual identity rather than continually pilfering from the past. Whew, okay, I'm done. Katana Zero is a side-scrolling action platformer from the people who brought you Hotline Miami, and it shows. Katana's protagonist is a morally ambiguous samurai assassin, dispatching enemies with a sword, explosive, or deflected bullet. Time can be slowed down Max Payne style to pull off spectacularly timed moves. Death is all too easy, as the player has no health bar. One hit, one kill. This, however, can be mitigated by one of the game's other central conceits, a time travel mechanic whereby the player can rewind time and try again. Like Forza Horizon, with ninjas. Like Hotline Miami before it, Katana Zero looks to be gaining something of a cult following, with fans rating it at 8.8. Number 1, Super Mario Odyssey. Everyone's favourite harmless stereotype is back in this, his 98th outing, not really, but possibly, for Nintendo that once again redefines the platform genre. This time Mario is joined by Cappy the Sentient Cap. No, my infant cousin didn't make that up, but he probably could have. Who gives Mario the ability to possess objects and creatures throughout the game and temporarily gain their abilities. This has given us such indelible images as Mario T-Rex and Bullet Mario. If you haven't played a Super Mario game in a while, this might all come across as exceedingly odd for a game about a plumber, but these days it's all just part of that famous Nintendo quirky charm. In other contexts, the idea of guiding your character on a collection quest through bizarre landscapes, meeting strange creatures and body snatching them would seem sinister. But hey, this is Mario. Everybody loves Mario, even the edgelords over at Metacritic, who gave it a grudging 9.0. And that's my list. My conclusion? Gamers be crazy. Am I wrong? Is this list better than the critics' list? Let me know below. Check out my other Switch list videos, and while you're down there, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.